all that you can.
Hello and welcome to the Atheist Experience. Today is January 8th, 2006. I am your host, Russell Glasser, and my co-host this week is Matt Dillahunty.
Hi, everybody.
We are sponsored by the Atheist Community of Austin, a non-profit organization promoting positive atheism and the separation of church and state. We have weekly meetings every Sunday at Romeo's at 1500 Barton Springs Road, west of South Lamar. That starts at 11:30 and is open to any atheist or atheist-friendly people. You don't need to be a member to come. That's every Sunday except for the third Sunday of each month when we have our lecture series at the Austin History Center on 9th and Guadalupe. Those start at 12:30. The next lecture coming up will be on January 15th, but it won't be a real lecture, and it won't be at the Austin History Center. Instead, we're all going down to Inner Space Caverns. What time? We're all going down to Inner Space Caverns, where our own Joe Zamecki will be the tour guide as he leads a bunch of atheists through and talks about things that are, I assume, of some interest to atheists.
Yeah, the tour will actually start at 1 o'clock, if according to the information that I have, and we're going to meet there at 12:30 at the site. And we've got in our newest newsletter, which just went out the other day, there's also some pictures that Joe sent us of things you can see in the cave. There's the Inner Space Caverns. We've got various nifty little displays and the Lake of the Moon and cave drapery and a bunch of other stuff. And Joe will be taking us there through the place. And that's next Sunday at 12:30. And there's a lot more information at the Atheist Community website.
That should be a blast. I plan to be there with family in tow. Okay, other regular events include Godless Gamers every Monday night at 7 o'clock at my house. See the website www.atheist-community.org for information on how to contact me and get directions. And of course, if you forget that, it'll be over Matt's head for the entire show. You can also email tv@atheist-community.org, and I will get that mail also. And then we have Atheist Happy Hour on Thursday nights, 7:30 at Antonio's Tex-Mex on the southbound feeder of I-35, just south of 183. Unholy Rollers is an atheist roller skating event every Tuesday night at Playland on McCann Drive near 183 and Burnett. You can check the website calendar for more information on regular and special events. We also have a regular internet audio show called The Non-Prophets every Saturday on freethoughtradio.com. However, freethoughtradio.com is off the air for the month of January, but we are not. So the next live show will be next weekend on January 14th. And you can go to www.nonprofitsradio.com to find out how to connect when freethoughtradio.com isn't working. The show is hosted by Jeff D., co-hosted by Dennis Loubet, and also features Matt Dillahunty here and myself.
And if you can't remember the nonprofitsradio.com website, you can go to atheist-community.org.
That's true.
And there's a link
you can
right
get
there.
a link from there too. You can find more information about the show and archives of past episodes at nonprofitsradio.com. The Atheist Community of Austin has a board meeting on the second Sunday of every month before the regular meeting. Currently, we are going to Schlotsky's Deli on 218 South Lamar, south of the bridge. All ACA members are welcome to come and sit in on board meetings, but only board members may vote. The next board meeting will be on February 12th. Today is January 8th, and if you plan to go to the board meeting, too bad you missed it. If you enjoy the program today and you think you would like to come and meet us, we regularly meet for dinner after the show. And currently we're going to Mongolian Barbecue at 117 San Jacinto Boulevard. To get there, just head a few blocks west on 1st Street from I-35. Mongolian Barbecue is a big Asian buffet where you pick your own meats, vegetables, noodles, and sauces, and they cook it up right in front of you, and it's huge fun, lots of cool people there, and if you would like to come and you are atheist or atheist friendly, then plan on showing up around 6:45. That's 45 minutes after the show ends. That's all for the regular announcements. Today is Russell Glasser's penultimate day as the host of the show.
Really?
Yes.
Okay.
Penultimate. Next to last.
Yeah.
Yes. So
I was thinking 2 weeks out.
yeah, so this week I'm going to be hosting the show. Next week I'm going to be hosting the show with Jeff D. And the week after that, Matt Dillahunty will become the full-time host for the show. Congratulations, Matt.
Thanks. And congratulations to you for one of the big reasons that you're
Thank you.
going to stop.
On Friday, I'm going to be attending the orientation for my classes at the University of Texas, where I'll be going for my master's degree in software engineering. Congratulations all around.
Yeah.
And I'm going to do the first story of the day today before we get to Matt's topic, which is basically talking about himself because Matt's a huge egotist.
That's right.
No, because we want to introduce you to the new host of the show, actually.
That's part of it.
Some big news happened this week, which, it will sound like at first maybe we're making light of it a little bit, and we're really not, because this is some upsetting news. But first of all, on January 3rd, I've got two news stories here. The first one is from the Washington Post, but it's fairly typical of the news stories that were going around on January 3rd. It says, 12 found alive in West Virginia coal mine. A dozen miners, this is in Sago, West Virginia, a dozen miners trapped 12,000 feet into a mountainside since early Monday were found alive Tuesday night, just hours after rescuers found the body of a 13th man who died in an explosion in an adjacent coal mine that was sealed off in early December. The bells at the Sago Baptist Church pealed, and joyous relatives rushed outside to celebrate their miracle. Miners surfacing after being in the cold, damp Sago mine for 41 hours. Governor Joe Manchin III said some would need medical attention. Everybody ran from the church screaming, "They're alive, they're coming," said Loretta Abels, whose fiancé, Fred Ware, was among the missing coal miners. She had lost hope when she learned about the dangerously high levels of carbon monoxide in the mine, but she was elated as she waited outside the church. "I feel great, very great." News from CNN the next day. Official. 12 of 13 miners dead. West Virginia, 11 miners initially reported to be alive after spending nearly 40 hours trapped underground following a mine explosion were found dead, and the only survivor was the man reported to be hospitalized in critical condition, officials said early Wednesday. Families learned the deaths from mine officials more than 3 hours after Governor Joe Manchin said he had been told that 12 of the miners survived the disaster. The sole survivor of the disaster was hospitalized, a doctor said. Okay, now I could turn this into a kind of a complaint about the way the media reports stuff and doesn't bother to check whether it's accurate, but that's not what I want to talk about right now. You'll notice I emphasize the word miracle in the first story. And this is something that we see a lot when a tragedy happens and it doesn't seem to be quite as bad as it could have been. So when it looked like 12 of the 13 miners were actually alive, people said it's a miracle and God got the credit. Now that 12 of the 13 were actually dead, suddenly the connection between this story and God sort of dried up. Nobody was talking about God anymore. It wasn't a miracle that one of the guys died, or that it wasn't a miracle that 12 of them died, and it wouldn't have been a miracle if 12 of them were alive either. That's our perspective as atheists. There is no malevolent God making sure that these 12 people died. But that would be the flip side of this sort of worldview where basically God is responsible for everything. And I think that whether or not the media are committed to printing things that they've checked out and know to be accurate, they could do with a little less editorializing about the religious implications of certain stories.
Yeah. In general, you kind of wonder, it's no surprise that people believed the initial report. I mean, you're getting a news item from some news source, which you probably consider to be reputable. But they then expanded it to, we all wanted the report to be true. Everybody would want these guys to survive.
Yeah.
It's the expansion of that hope and the initial acceptance of the first report into something which would support their beliefs, something which would, fall in line with their preconceptions about the world. That's kind of, I don't know, it dovetails in a way with what I was going to talk about today. For those who actually looked at the website to find out what the topic was going to be, it said it was going to be the Golden Rule, and I've canned that because this is my last opportunity to be co-host for a while. And in the past, I've alluded to different things about my progression from fundamentalist Christian to atheist, but I didn't actually go into detail on a lot of it and explain things. In the past week or so, there's been a lot of discussion going on in my personal life. I often have debates on email or in person with different people. I have this fascination with why two people who are both intelligent, when faced with the same evidence, would draw different conclusions. But I wanted to take today and kind of go through how I got from fundamentalist Christian to, I suppose the only proper word would be evangelical atheist. It's hard to say that I'm just an atheist when obviously I'm, perpetually on TV talking about why. And so background, I was raised in a normal Southern Baptist home, or in Missouri. My parents were regular Southern Baptist Christian people, as were my grandparents. Went to church, was, drugged to church, I suppose, as a little kid, like a lot of people were. And around the age of 5 or so, at a revival meeting, I walked down the aisle along with a bunch of other people to accept Jesus into my heart, because everybody wants to go to heaven. And in retrospect, looking back on that, it might explain why I have such an objection to people indoctrinating children into beliefs at an early age. I'm not saying it's you teach your kids right from wrong and morals and everything. But I've heard it said in much the same way that we don't refer to a 5-year-old as a 5-year-old Republican or a 5-year-old Democrat. It's wrong to call them a 5-year-old Southern Baptist or a 5-year-old, Catholic or whatever else. Until you've actually reached the age of reason and been presented with the information, the arguments. Sure, you can still believe. But you can also believe in Santa Claus or the Easter Bunny or any number of things. You haven't actually processed and considered the evidence. When we talk about atheism on the show, you can be an atheist for all kinds of reasons. A lot of people, make accusations against some of us. You don't really disbelieve in God. You believe in Him, you just don't acknowledge Him, or you're mad at Him, or something bad happened to you, and now you're ticked off at God, and you're out to get anybody who still wants to believe. And I'm sure there are plenty of people out there calling themselves atheists who may fit that kind of description, because in much the same way that everybody doesn't become a Christian for the same reasons, or a Buddhist, or a Hindu, or Muslim, or whatever, you don't always become an atheist for the same reason. I am an atheist for a very different reason, and as I go through this, I think it'll be kind of clear that I'm definitely not one of those who got mad at God and looked for a way to write God out of my life or tick off the people who do believe in God. So I was pretty much a normal kid after that. Had accepted Jesus as my Savior at about the age of 5. Went to church regularly along with everybody else, and there was a period of time in my teens where I was actually more active than my parents were. It was no longer an issue of, okay, you're getting dressed and you're going to church. I was in church Sunday morning, Sunday night. Monday night was visitation. Tuesday night was, I believe, the youth group, or maybe that was Thursday night. Wednesday night was normal services. Basically, almost every day of the week, there was something going on. And I was involved. It was completely out of choice. And we would, not only do like summer camp, Baptist camp, whatever, we did mission outreach stuff. We would, take a bus over to Illinois and help repair and rebuild an old church, and good charitable things and witnessing and visiting with people who visited the church on Sunday. And that was all important to me because, there was no doubt I was a true believer in doing what I needed to do. I was not the perfect church-going teen. I got in my fair share of trouble for all kinds of things like any other teen. But to say that my experience was atypical would be, in a way, right and in a way wrong. It was probably more religious than the average person. There was a period of time in my teens where I kind of doubted my faith, because at that time you realize, hey, I got saved at the age of 5. Did I really know what I was doing? I mean, am I really saved? Did I do it right the first time? So you do it again. And I can't tell you how many Christians I've talked to who have gone through that experience multiple times. In my early teens, I recognized that, wow, I needed to do this again, or I probably should, or, and even in typical Christian parlance, it's you rededicate your life, which is kind of a safety check to make sure you've absolutely done it right. And then they have the another term for people who fall away from their religion, and those are backsliders. And if you backslide for long enough, then it's time for another rededication. And it's this constant fight with reality. And the reality is that in a lot of cases, no matter how much you believe or think you believe, reality creeps in. You're faced with the harshness of life. And while Christians might, attribute that sort of trouble to the devil tempting you, from my view now, it's just the nature thing. It's just human nature and interaction that creates these problems. And distractions. I mean, once you start a regular job after school, you have less time for things. In my case, it was the Navy. I joined the Navy shortly after high school because I wasn't going to have enough money to go to college, and because I had been particularly stubborn and lazy during high school, which is, of course, is something I regret because, now I can't read enough books or learn enough things, but at the time, it was easier to sleep through sociology and take the test at the end of the week and hope I got enough right than it was to actually pay attention. But I went ahead and joined the Navy, partly for lack of other options. They had a good nuclear power program with big bonuses, and I was wanting to get married, and that seemed like the way to go. That period of time I don't mention because the Navy in and of itself was crucial. It represented a separation from the constant reinforcement that I'd had before. And I think in any journey from religiousness to atheism or agnosticism, or however you end up characterizing yourself, you have to have that separation. If you're in church every week, several times a week, and you're always around church-going people, you have a level of constant reinforcement where you're feeling you belong to something, and you're with a whole lot of other people who, anytime you doubt, you can just look at them and, well, they believe it, so clearly my doubts must not be, reasonable. So during that time in the Navy, I did normal things, and I still believed it, but it was like a cooling off period that I think everybody needs in a sense. Nobody comes straight out of a Sunday morning service, reads a book, and becomes an atheist, or at least nobody I've met. But after the Navy, which I was in the Navy for about 8 years, I left and I moved to Austin and decided I was working for Dell at the time. Decided that I needed to get my life back on track with regard to religion and Jesus. And so I started considering things and began to have doubts about what I believed and why. Did this really make sense? Was this, what about my belief on abortion or homosexuality or creation versus evolution or any number of other things? Were these things really right? It became much more important for me to not only know and accept those beliefs on faith, but to actually have good support for them. And some Christians might immediately say, well, that's where you went wrong. because you just got to take it all on faith. But something in me at some point changed, where faith at that point was not necessarily enough, and later it changed to where faith was not desirable at all. And the good reason for that is that beliefs based on faith are the riskiest beliefs you can possibly hold. If you hold beliefs based on substantial, real evidence, sound logic and reason, you're always at a little bit of risk, because at any time anything could be wrong. Science doesn't provide 100% proven facts on anything. It provides theories that are the best answer we can come up with at this time, and they're subject to change. And there's some of them that we think are pretty settled, and we're never going to see anything that completely flips them upside down with a complete replacement. But there's always refining going on. And beliefs based on faith, and fundamentalism in particular, where your beliefs are not allowed to be changed. There's a famous thing that once said, God said it, I believe it, and that settles it. And then somebody noticed that, well, whether or not you believe it doesn't really matter. So then they changed it to God said it and I believe it. But that really didn't fix anything, because there still has to be the belief that God actually said it. And the level of faith that you need to justify those beliefs really doesn't seem warranted. So I had a period of time where I was as doubting. My uncle, who used to be a medical missionary and is a doctor in Dallas now, recommended Josh McDowell's book, Evidence That Demands a Verdict. And I'll say right off the top, if you're already a Bible-believing Christian, dyed-in-the-wool on any level, even with just minor doubts, it's an outstanding book. It'll confirm everything you want to believe, as long as you don't ever question it, you don't ever try and verify what's in there to see how reliable it is. Boy, it sure looks good. Let's throw in a little history, and here's a little argument, here's a little clip from Josephus, a historian from around the 1st century, and here's this and here's that, and boy, these arguments all look airtight, as long as you don't ever investigate them, as long as you don't try and find out, is Josh expanding this to fit the bill? And I wasn't willing to just accept that, because as I read through it, he made some arguments in the book that I just, yeah, I see that, but it's not making sense to me. Let me see if I can find more information. And partially by accident, I stumbled across the Internet Infidel site and jumped into their library and found somebody who had written a lengthy critique of that particular book. And that was my first, okay, maybe there's two sides to this and I need to find more evidence. And I would kind of set that aside. One of my longtime heroes, because I'd always been somewhat of a critical thinker and a skeptic, I just never applied that to my religious beliefs, was James Randi. And in reading his site, he has recently changed things a little bit, but it used to be he didn't comment on religion. I mean, it was well known he was an atheist and was against all sorts of flummery and scams and superstitious nonsense. And of course, he's got the $1 million challenge, or award. It's not actually a challenge. If you make any supernatural occult claim, whatever, dowsing, reading minds, and you can prove it under test conditions, you get $1 million. Just that simple. So if you think you can read tarot cards and tell people their future, or read stars and tell them their future, if you know for sure you've got ghosts and you can prove it, dowsing, healing touch, homeopathy, acupuncture, whatever, all you have to do is demonstrate under test conditions and you get $1 million. So far, nobody's passed the preliminary at all. And yeah, there's debate on that, but that's kind of off the topic. It's mostly ad hoc complaints that, well, it wasn't fair because there were skeptics around and their negative energy was stopping me from being able to perform properly, which is a bunch of crap. If then they didn't just need to prove the negative energy and everything, it'd be fine. But it was through this time, and I didn't limit myself once I found out that there were objections to Josh's book, for example, and others. I didn't immediately jump over and start reading everything that I could against Christianity and religion. I kept it as balanced as I could. I went, okay, well, what about this issue? Let me see what I can find both ways on this. And while I can quote you the names of some of the people who were most influential, like Farrell Till and Colonel Ingersoll, Bertrand Russell, Voltaire, Dan Barker, all these guys, I didn't just read atheist propaganda. I was starting with a bias that not only was Christianity real, but I was going to have to find enough evidence to convince me that it wasn't before I'd ever change my mind. And while there's sites out there with good information like BibleTrash.com, I also spent a lot of time at carm.org, which is the Christian Apologetics and Resource Ministry, and a few other apologist sites where they responded. And there's an ongoing debate. It's not settled as to the issue, but when you start looking at the evidence and the arguments, the apologist replies aren't very convincing. It's, okay, you found the fatal flaw in our writing, but it could be this too. And then, I had a guy that I was speaking with.
Incidentally, I think it's good that you went to apologist sites too, because that is actually, we've talked about evidence that demands a verdict,
right.
McDowell's book, before on the show, and one of the big criticisms that we have of it is that it was completely one-sided. I mean, he looked for Christians to convince him that Christianity was true, and when they said what they said, he replied, "Oh, okay, that makes sense to me," and he just went on about his business and eventually became a Christian. And that's really shallow.
Well, Lee Strobel was actually worse about it, because Lee tried to make it look like in the Case for Christ, Case for Creator, etc., he tried to make it look like he was actually...
I'm thinking of Lee Strobel.
Yeah, he might have been.
My mistake.
He would try and make it look like he was getting the skeptic side, but he would pick extremely weak arguments and nothing really substantial. Josh's books did have, commentary, which was all one-sided.
Yeah, and that's kind of one thing I was thinking about while you were talking is if you want to convince people that you're right, it's a really bad idea to suppress the other side because it's easily detectable by somebody who thinks about it.
Sure.
And they might not know what's wrong with your arguments because you don't present the other side, but they start to think more and more, this is really not giving me information. It's, and if somebody detects that you're hiding some arguments, some counter arguments, most reasonable people will go look for them.
Yeah, that's in a real way. That's kind of what was happening to me. Was I read Josh's book, and while I could have accepted it all on face value and said, "Hey, here's a guy who's much smarter than me, who's done all the research, who's presenting all these arguments, and he's got historical proof and things which look real and are probably likely. There's no reason for me to look any further. This book has settled it for me." For whatever reason, and I don't know that I was practiced enough to be able to spot the particular flaws in his arguments or in the evidence that he presented, but there were bits of it that just weren't hitting home. And it was in looking for other answers or better explanations. I wasn't necessarily looking for somebody to say, here's what's wrong with that and why. It was, explain this in another way because Josh didn't do it well enough. And after going through all that, I didn't immediately just, after, and this is a several years long process that I did lots of reading on lots of subjects, and there was a period of 2 years that I took off work or was between jobs, but I stayed at home quite a bit during that time and read. And my entire purpose for doing this was to reinforce my faith, because I had considered, okay, now I've got my GI Bill, it's time for me to go back to school. I can also go to seminary, which is something I'd considered doing, in my late teens as well. But I couldn't justify going to seminary if I still had doubts. I needed to reaffirm things, so I started studying. At some point, after a year, 2 years, my position was, I no longer necessarily identified myself as a Christian, but I certainly didn't consider myself an atheist. It was, okay, this could or couldn't be true. I'm still leaning towards, there is a God, but I need to keep reading and doing more research. I need to keep thinking about this and considering arguments. And the other thing that hit me was, well, you can't just discuss about Christianity. Because what if I were to absolutely prove, which isn't possible, that everything about Christianity is completely false and it's not a religion worth being a member of? The beliefs are unfounded and it's bad juju. That doesn't mean that there's no God. That doesn't mean that some other religion didn't get it right. It didn't really mean much at all except for this one thing is wrong. And that forced me to kind of broaden the research I was doing into things. Okay, let's say for a second that I did find out that Christianity isn't the right thing. Are there other religions that might be? So you need to take a look into various sects of Christianity, various doctrines, Protestant, Catholic, and then all the different varieties of Protestants that come along. Because one thing you notice is that while we do often on the show get calls from fundamentalists, we also get calls from some liberal Christians who agree with us on a number of issues, for church-state separation. They've adopted an idea that is often more of, we're taking the good stuff and building a religion on it and ignoring the bad stuff. Somebody got something wrong there because that is just inconsistent with our concept of a benevolent God. So, they're not professing any direct, literal truth to the Bible, but it was in the process of reviewing other religions and studying philosophical arguments for the existence of God and everything else that the balance of this began to tip, and it seemed far more reasonable to me that if we're going to establish a belief on anything, if we're going to try and determine reality from fantasy and build beliefs and understandings, the best way to do that is to look for real evidence. And that's not saying I have to see it to believe it. I mean, I haven't seen an atom, or at least not an individual one, blah, blah, blah. I've never been to Australia. I know it's there, at least in any sense that I could know. Establishing reasonable beliefs does not set you up for, I have to see everything in order to believe it. What you're doing is establishing a scale, a quality/quantity of supporting evidence to determine whether or not a belief's justified. The more unrealistic a claim is, the more exceptional the evidence to support that claim is. It's Sagan did the dragon in the garage, and it's kind of, if I tell you I just got a new pet dog, there's nothing in that claim that's exceptional. We know dogs exist, we know people keep them as pets, blah, blah, blah. It may or may not be true, and in this case it isn't, because I don't have a dog anymore, but there's nothing that requires a great deal of evidence to support that. And the other thing is that whether or not you believe it doesn't fundamentally change your life. If you find out that I was wrong or lying, the foundations of your life aren't changed. But if I make the claim that I have a dragon in my garage, now all of a sudden we need to have really good proof. Because if a dragon existed and I had one as a pet, that would change everybody's lives. Because it's something new, which seems to contradict known evidence, and it needs the evidence to support it. So the process after setting aside Christianity, considering lots of other things, considering philosophical arguments, all that took several years, and there's not one single argument that was the one which convinced me, or one single moment where I said, aha, I'm an atheist now. It was just one day after all of this, and I'm not even sure which day, I just said, I don't believe that stuff anymore. And the best thing I can say about it is that even after acknowledging I didn't believe it anymore and realizing that I identified myself now as an atheist, that I wasn't done looking at the issue. For some people, it's fine. Once you've made up your mind about it, there's no reason to really consider it anymore or discuss it or debate it. For me, it was, there's no reason not to continue looking. It's an important question. Who wouldn't want to live on after death or experience, a heaven and avoid a hell? But it's not now, the quest isn't so much for confirmation of it. If confirmation ever shows up, I'm all for it. Now what I study is broader based things because I have not only a strong desire to learn as much as I can about things, but I'm a little distraught by the fact that you could take me and another person who is a fundamentalist Christian, equally intelligent, supposedly equally reasonable, present both of us with all of the evidence that I've reviewed and evidence that I haven't gotten to yet, and one of us would end up rejecting religion and accepting, that they're now an atheist, and the other one would hold fast to their beliefs, in spite of everything. And the only way to describe that is faith. Faith being the belief in something without evidence to support it, or in the face of evidence to the contrary. And I don't feel, Don talked about faith last week. We talked about faith-based beliefs and why they're, unreasonable, unwarranted. So I don't want to necessarily go through all that again, except to say if there's some question that somebody puts before you and you're looking to find the answer and you have reliable evidence that points in one direction, to go the opposite direction just because it's the most comfortable to you is the exact thing that I'm trying to avoid, or have always tried to avoid since I began this. The purpose is to try to have a good understanding of reality as best we can. It's not any denial. Nothing ever happened that made me mad at God. I just simply stopped believing when it was no longer supported by any evidence or any faith in my head. But I've rattled on long enough, and you'll get to see me every week. So let's hit some callers, or okay. You got something you want to go over?
This is a live call-in show, and the phone number has been hovering at the bottom of your screen for a little while now, and we have full lines at this point, even though we didn't make the announcement. So after we talk to a couple of people, feel free to call in at this phone number, and if you don't see it today, it's because you're watching a rerun. So we're going to go straight to our first caller, Lenny.
Yeah, what up, man?
Hey, Lenny.
Is it kind of loud, or it seems kind of loud on my TV? I'm turning my TV down. I watch y'all show and things, and from the main reason I watch is to hear the Christians tell y'all are basically, these blood drinking, saber-toothed demons who are destined for eternal torture. Well, but seriously, I'm on this internet forum, and God says that no one is, that everyone's agnostic, that either you're an atheist, you cannot know for sure that there's not a God, and the theist can't know for sure that there is a God. So I was wondering what y'all thought about that.
I'll go with that, although some people are pretty sure even though they really shouldn't be.
In the strictest definition, atheism doesn't claim to know for certain that there isn't a God. It's a lack of belief in a God.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Right.
There are atheists, and they often get the designator hard atheists who flatly say there is no God. I find that most of the time when I come across somebody who's saying it, it's either somebody who hasn't really dug in to evaluate the question and just isn't that concerned with the logical contradiction there, or it's somebody who accepts a logical argument that the best one I've heard kind of runs along the lines of every claim about God that we would generally run across portrays him as somebody who cares about and is involved. And that type of God, we would have there's so much evidence against that kind of God. We don't have a uniform understanding. We don't have incontrovertible evidence. So if he exists, he either doesn't want us to know or have a clear understanding about him, or he's intentionally hiding. In either case,
just bringing this back to the example I used at the beginning of the show, you had these 12 miners who everybody thought were alive for a while, and it was a miracle. And then suddenly, no, actually all but one of the miners are dead. And so, people can't even really agree on right. the way God actually acts.
Yeah, the final argument for those people who fall into the hard atheist category is that either there is a God and he doesn't want us to know about him, or there is a God and we can't possibly know about him, or there isn't a God. And all three cases, from our point of view, look exactly the same. The invisible looks very much identical to the non-existent. And for those people who use that type of logic to make the assertion that there is no God, I can understand that. You can talk about things in all kinds of different scopes. But yeah, in the strictest, atheism is just a lack of belief.
Okay, I have one more comment. I used to be a Christian, you know what I'm saying? But I never did pass the Christian math class. It's like I never understood how 3 equals 1.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, we actually had good discussions in the last couple of weeks about trying to find the best way to explain the Trinity. And I never found a really good way. It's just something
I
you believe.
never found it all that complicated. I mean, I know that people go on and on about how, you know, oh, this is very mysterious and it shows how mysterious God is. I was like, okay, so you've got one person who appears to be 3 different ways. Big deal.
Well, yeah, no, you can have a view like that where you're talking about like aspects of God, like you know, and things. But there's a fundamental problem with the Trinity in Christianity specifically, and that is this concept that Jesus suffered in the garden in the day prior to that, which is God experiencing sin for the first time, which defies what we're supposed to believe about God being all-knowing, because that would require him to have an understanding of sin. Then there is the Christian tenet that when Jesus is on the cross, or maybe before the beating started, God actually left, and we just really sacrificed a body, because you can't kill a God, so we only sacrificed a body.
Well, there's an easy answer to the dilemma, and that's that it's all made up.
Yeah. I think that's the most likely.
Okay, well, thanks for calling, Lenny.
Yeah, later.
Thanks a lot.
I'm going to move on to our next caller. First, though, apparently somebody called up and didn't want to go on the air. Just wanted us to know that the last name of the guy who plays Jesus Christ in the new Book of Daniel TV show is Dillahunty.
Yeah.
Probably no relation.
Probably is.
Oh.
It was originally Dillahunty, and ended in an E, and in the early 1700s when my family came over, there were a couple different name changes and they branched off there. So if we go back about 8 generations, we're probably related.
Okay.
He looks a lot more like Jesus, at least the way we think Jesus looked, according to all the pictures that, you know, romanticized him, than I do.
Rather than a short, goofy-looking Middle Eastern guy.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Next caller is Chris.
Hey guys, I call in a lot. You have a great show. I just wanted to comment about the earlier reference to the age of reason.
Yeah, that might actually have been the wrong phrase too. I just realized.
Well, I just it occurs to me that there are so many. There's just a lot of vagueness about it. You have situations where you have young people who are held accountable for things that they do, you know, when they're very young, and then, you know, you've got like age of consent laws that are different all over the place, and
age of accountability. I think
accountability is the right term.
Right.
Age of reason's Thomas Paine's book,
right, which was interesting a few weeks ago because there used to be a limbo, and now apparently there isn't.
Well, some people still believe in limbo, I guess, but I guess the comment I wanted to make was that, you know, I became an atheist, or, you know, started thinking that the concept of God was just ridiculous at about age 9, and I'm sure there are young people about that age, maybe even younger, who really have considered, you know, have enough snap at that age to think, well, maybe you know, there is a God, and I believe that there is, whatever. So we should at least consider that, you know, some children or some young people, you know, have the ability to make a decision like that. On the other hand, they have also the ability to be wrong, you know. So, you know, my point is, I guess, is that there should be some sort of universal litmus test about, you know, what constitutes somebody who has a brain. I mean, and there are a lot of adults who can't make decisions for themselves, and, you know, shouldn't be making decisions like getting married and voting, you know, for a guy or whatever.
Yeah, age ends up being a very arbitrary place to draw a line, because some people mature at different rates, and I mean, there's of course adults who have, you know, the mental capacity or skills for whatever reason of a child under, you know, a 5-year-old.
Yeah, but the problem is, no matter how you divide them up, it's going to be arbitrary because, I mean, you've basically got this sort of binary system.
Do a test.
Yeah, but you've got this binary system where people are completely good and completely bad. They go to heaven, they go to hell. And the real world isn't like that. You know, people sort of run a spectrum. I mean, there are really good people and there are really bad people, but in between you've got most people on the bell curve who are like, you know, they do bad things sometimes and they do good things sometimes. And so if you're going to have a hard dividing line, you've got to have people who are almost identical to each other. But only one goes to heaven and one goes to hell because he was slightly better than the other guy.
Well, I think the point that I'm making is to come up with some kind of a test instead of just having different jurisdictions and even parents decide, hey, if you're not going to believe in my God, I'm going to send you to a camp or something where they beat you up twice a day, or, you know, that stuff happens to a lot of kids, you know, where they live, you know, 18 years under a roof, and they have, you know, they're completely middle-aged, owned by somebody. And, you know, especially in places like Texas, you know, if something horrible happens to these poor kids, you know, a lot of it isn't followed up on. A lot of it isn't, you know, depending on whether or not you have a person who is in the CPS who happens to be Christian and decides, oh, well, you know, he just beat him up a little bit or whatever. But, you know, so there should be some kind of a test to decide, you know, when a young person has enough snap to make a decision, an adult decision, you know.
I think we've got kind of a good approximation of it. Of course, you're never going to narrow it down because everybody's different. But you know, you look at a zone and you look at the approximate, you kind of measure out what kind of decisions are being made. The teen times are terrible, especially for decision making, and it's not because they're not particularly intelligent. It's a matter of building life experience plus fighting hormones and peer pressure and any number of other things. Yeah, we still got to draw a line and say, you know what, whether you're actually competent and responsible, we're going to start holding you responsible.
Okay, well, here's something that I notice a lot in the news, and it's something that's bothered me for a long time. It's whenever you see a situation where some young person has done something horrible. For instance, there was something in the news just like, I think it was like a month ago or whatever, where this kid went and killed his girlfriend's parents, or did you hear about this thing? And then it took this girl, and they took off, whatever. Anyway, the parents didn't want him around, and he ended up killing them. Okay. They were reporting, everywhere I looked, they were reporting an 18-year-old boy. Okay. They do that with certain types of people, and I'm not going to get into the race thing, but if a person looks a certain way or whatever, they report an 18-year-old youth or something like this. Now, and you go around, and if something terrible happens from somebody else, it's an 18-year-old man, or even a 17-year-old man.
Sort of like the difference between looting stores and finding things in them, right? Exactly.
And you made a great point about how the news spins this whole thing. On that point, I would love to see some sort of thing where, you know, I wouldn't love to see a tragedy, but I would love to see where somebody gets something, you know, somebody is saved, and, you know, the news guys come up and he says, well, I want to thank the firemen, and I want to thank this guy, and I don't want to thank a God because I'm an atheist and I don't believe in any of that crap, but you know what, I'm so happy that Mama got saved or whatever else. And nobody ever shows that because it's not sensational. You know, it doesn't sell papers or whatever.
Yeah, I had a discussion with a guy the other day who became a Christian because he had been terribly injured in an accident, and the doctors worked their asses off for months and saved him, and then instead of giving the doctors any credit, he credited it all to Jesus.
Yeah.
It's got to be insulting if you're a doctor. Okay, thank you for calling, Chris.
Thanks a lot. Great show, guys.
Bye. And of course, if you are an atheist or an atheist-friendly person, as Chris, of course, was, then you're always welcome to come to Mongolian Barbecue after the show. Mongolian Barbecue will all be there at 6:45. That's 45 minutes after the show ends. And it's at 117 San Jacinto Boulevard, downtown, a bit west of I-35, and near 1st Street. Also, if you'd really like to get in touch with us, but you're kind of shy about being on the phone, we have an email address that you can always write to anytime during the week, tv@atheist-community.org, and there's lots of people just dying to answer email there. Next caller, we've got John.
Yeah,
hello?
Good afternoon.
How you doing?
Well, I was just calling in. I was listening, going across the channels, really, and just happened upon y'all. And the fellow sitting to the left of the two, I believe the screener said your name's Matt.
Yeah.
I was just listening to you, and from your own words, have an inquiring mind, and that you come across as a person who does, in fact. And so I just wanted to invite you. You were talking about like experiential knowledge of God, if such a thing were possible. There's a little church in Geronimo, Texas, which if you go on the Highway 123 between San Marcos and Seguin, it's about 5 miles before you get into Seguin. And I would just invite you, Sunday morning of your choice at 10:30, you might get some experiential knowledge. What goes
on there that makes it different or special from the myriad other churches that I grew up in and have been to?
That the presence of God is manifest in the place.
Well, I've felt the experience that you refer to as the presence of God.
Well,
I've been to revivals. I've been overcome with emotion, knocked to my knees, felt called to be in the ministry, which was what started all this, to go study in the seminary. I'm curious as to, I'm not saying I'm opposed to it, because I've actually been considered visiting a number of churches around town for different reasons, but I was just wondering if there was something special about that church that made it different from the others.
Other than what I just said, because I also have searched out, I see a very large amount of Christianity to be without any power or presence of God, in the congregation and the goings-on, and it's, kind of a social club to me, many of them. And I've looked and searched and, called out to God. I sure wish I had a place where I could go, and it seemed really to be for real.
And he answered you with this church in Geronimo.
Yeah.
Did you hear the voice actually, or did you just stumble across it?
I kind of stumbled into it, and then on the way home from having stumbled into what I thought at the time was perhaps a chance meeting, but looked like it might have got set up, I had the very vivid impression that I ought to go by over there and check it out. And me and my wife and a friend have been over there, and we've been there for a while.
Okay. I'm not saying I will or I won't. It depends on how much time I have and on what day. But it is something that I've been interested in doing, so it's possible.
Well, you could be welcome and feel well at ease when you come. You'll be well received. Thanks.
I will say that, I have, at least to the extent that I understand it, experienced things as many other people have in a variety of different churches. And I've been to Southern Baptist revivals and Pentecostal churches and services and experienced all kinds of things that at the time I couldn't explain. And the thing to remember, because I get this a lot, especially, in other conversations, is, well, why don't you come to church with me? I'll show you, that our church is different, and this is where the real Jesus is. Like, I've never experienced any of this before. Personal experience is an exceptionally poor, if not vastly incompetent way of deciding what is real and what isn't real, because we can be fooled by a lot of things. Magicians do it. And, you listen to like certain rock music or opera or orchestras and stuff. You can get some of the same tingly feelings and emotions of elation. You get them in movies. I mean, movies prey on that stuff. Let's put the right image up with the right music, and you get chills down your spine. Well, if you take that exact same feeling and you have it in a church where there's a minister talking about Jesus and how this is all true and how you can feel it in your life, that feeling, regardless of what actually caused it, instantly gets attributed to Jesus, just like the proposed miracles get attributed to that, any number of other things. And I'm not being dismissive. I'm just explaining that I've been there and I have some sort of explanation. I didn't just wake up and decide to be an atheist, but. Right. If I have time, sure, I can add that church to the list of ones that I was planning on going to anyway.
Okay, very good.
Okay, See you later.
Thanks.
As an atheist, you kind of get challenged a lot about do something to open yourself to the personal experience. Like, just go to this church. Just get down on your knees, and say, I'm a sinner. And unlike you, I haven't been to a lot of churches, but I've followed some of their advice sometimes. Like, that thing at the end of every Jack Chick comic, you get down on your knees and say, oh God, I know I am a sinner, please forgive me. I did that, just for the hell of it.
And that's supposed to be, according to most Christian doctrines, all you need.
Which means I'm saved now.
Evidently.
I'm a saved atheist. Good for me.
Although you have to really believe it. So, it's always a claim you didn't really believe it.
Oh, well, that's the catch, though.
Yeah. But I had somebody tell me the other day that there's no way I'm going to hell. He was convinced that my experience in Christianity was real. I was a true Christian, even though everybody has a really impossible time defining that. Yeah, well, I'd be in heaven.
All I'm thinking is that if just going to this church is a test, or just getting down on your knees is a test, and if that would change your heart, then if it's a real test, then it ought to work both ways. So if I get down on my knees, say, oh God, I know I'm a sinner, if I go to the church and say hallelujah and I don't feel a thing, nothing happens, then I feel it's only fair that the person who invited me ought to admit that that's evidence that their God doesn't exist.
Yeah, it may not be, proof positive, but it's definitely evidence. Yeah, it's
right.
If there's another bit to this, and I don't mean to slam on the guy. I understand you. I know that you're just doing this out of what you think is the kindness of your heart and everything. If this particular church in Geronimo was just wonderfully filled with what you consider to be the Holy Spirit, everybody on the planet would already know it. If all it takes to convince a now somewhat dyed-in-the-wool atheist is to come in and sing some hymns and listen to the preaching and feel the chill go up your spine, well, everybody'd be saved already, because the word would have spread like wildfire.
Okay.
But I might go.
All right. We go next to Tracie.
Hey.
Hi.
Hey.
I called originally to talk about the everyone's an agnostic statement. Whenever it kind of annoys me, because I find that when I talk to a Christian, they generally use a type of logic with their religion that they don't use with anything else in their life. They would never apply the arguments that they apply to their religion to any other pragmatic issue in their existence.
Yeah, I think I see where you're going.
Although some of them do extend it to other supernatural claims, which is why they get hoodwinked by psychics and other things.
Right. You are giving them a huge amount of leeway to say that, well, technically a person can't say there is no God. I understand where you're coming from, and I think that's an accurate statement.
Right, but you could ask, was George Washington the first president of the United States? And they would say yes, and then you could say, oh, were you there?
Well, what I generally say is, can they feel comfortable telling me that they know there is no such thing as leprechauns?
Right.
And I don't know anybody who's going to honestly say, well, no, I really can't say that I don't believe in, that I don't think leprechauns exist. It's like, yes, you do not think that leprechauns exist.
Yeah. Well, actually, I do say that, just for the sake of intellectual rigor, actually. I say I can't know that leprechauns don't exist.
Right, but you're saying that it's like part of kind of like a stretch of the argument to show to illustrate that.
I'm perfectly happy saying there's no such thing as leprechauns, there's no such thing as unicorns, Santa Claus, or God.
Right.
But for the purposes of deeper discussion, I'm also willing to say that I don't know that any of those are true.
Right.
They're just what I believe based on the evidence.
Right, but what I'm saying is that the person that asked me, can I say that I don't know God exists, my question to them is, can they say leprechauns don't exist?
Right.
And they almost always will, if they're honest, they will say, yes, they do say that, they can say that, they're comfortable saying that. It's like, why are you comfortable saying that? Because you know they're not real. Why do you know they're not real? Because there's no evidence for them. They're like little fantasy fairy stories, and if you could prove it, if somebody could prove it, or if there's a shred of evidence for it, then it would be in question. But there's not. And so how often do you have to look at no evidence before you finally just say, you know what, this isn't here? And I wanted to also, just while I was on hold, I heard the guy talking about God manifesting in his church.
Yeah.
And I wanted to let him know that if he's interested, if they'd like to expand their church, James Randi would be happy to give them $1 million if they can simply illustrate this manifestation in a real way.
Yeah. $1 million I have a feeling do a lot for a small church.
I have a feeling I might have made a mistake in interpreting what he was saying as the funny feeling. He may have actually been talking about a visual or auditory or somehow tangible manifestation of God. I didn't get that impression, but
even if he means a personal experience, he can illustrate that this is God and not just simply some emotional high. Randi will give him $1 million.
Yep.
Yeah. So unfortunately, God never shows up in photographs in that church, even though he's really there.
Anyway, there was just one other thing I wanted to say, which was I was on a forum recently, and one of the Christians on the forum had written that he had problems with a certain argument that I was using because somebody who had posed it believed in astrology. And he was saying, this was supposed to discredit the person. Well, they believe in astrology. And I was thinking, yeah, and you believe in demons and angels and all kinds of weird crap too. And I'm not sitting here, it's like, it was so funny to me. It's like, why don't you believe astrology? And the other thing that blew my mind is astrologists in the Bible were called wise men.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, so you have astrologists in the Bible that are labeled wise men, and the Bible totally, in the New Testament, is talking about how they were right on, reading into the stars, this birth of the king, and going and traveling, and they knew exactly where he was born by looking at the stars.
Yeah.
And you're going to sit there and tell me that this other person is a bunch of bunk, anything they say, because they believed in astrology. It's like, you believe the Bible?
In those days, or maybe in previous days, astrology and astronomy were pretty much united as one thing, and it was the scientific discipline of astronomy which broke off from astrology.
Right. Anyway, that was just kind of my comments. It bothers me the intellectual dishonesty or the hypocritical type of reasoning where it's like they just break off into this other type of logic where if you can't say there's no God because no one knows one way or another. It's like, well, no one knows one way or another if there's leprechauns, but I'm willing to say I know there's no such thing as a leprechaun, and I'm totally comfortable living my life and saying that.
There's a sort of voluntary ignorance that goes along with holding religious beliefs in today's world because you're constantly faced with good arguments or evidence or a lack of evidence and arguments to support your position. So it's just easier to say, I don't want to think about that or I don't want to look about it.
One of the other things I like to put forward is that there is more evidence for Bigfoot and alien abduction currently available than there is for God. There are like hundreds of people who are willing to describe their alien abduction experience that they had, that are witness for that, like right now. Right here living, you can go and talk to them.
Yep.
You don't have anything like that, except for, I guess, the people that say that God is talking to them now. But, I mean, as far as, people who say I've, been abducted by aliens or I've seen Bigfoot, I've got pictures of Bigfoot, I've got, plaster casts of Bigfoot tracks. You don't see plaster casts of God tracks. You don't see people saying God abducted me and this is my experience with God or I've got video footage of God. It's like, there's more evidence for tons of other things that are completely thought of as bunk.
But he shows up in tortillas all the time.
That's true. In Mexico, there is a lot of evidence for God. In Italy, I guess too.
Yeah, all those reasons that we can all look at that evidence and say, you know what, that's a lot of evidence, but that's not good any evidence. Anyway.
Correct.
Yeah, a lot of really
that's the same
evidence.
thing we can do. We can say, with regard to. There's a question as to whether or not Jesus actually existed historically. The historicity of Jesus is something which is very much in question.
Right.
And there's big debates over it, and I've been involved in one for a while now. And it kind of baffles me that I'm actually involved in the debate because I certainly haven't made up my mind about it.
Right.
Because I don't think all the evidence is in. But simply by saying that I believed there was substantial reason to doubt the existence and that the question was open and we needed to consider it further, that was enough to, string me up, boy. They had a field day with that.
I'm sure.
Tracie, is there any chance you'll be joining us for dinner at Mongolian Barbecue at 6:45?
Oh, it's just a little bit out of my way. I'm way up in North Austin.
Well, we change locations every once in a while. I think we're scheduled for a new place in February, so keep watching for details.
Oh, I do, and I've been to the dinners before, so
yeah.
I'll go ahead and...
You've been to Fresh Choice a couple of times, haven't you?
Yeah. I think I saw you one time with your kid, too, bouncing around on the stairs. Anyway, I'll let somebody else talk.
Thanks.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure.
Tracie is, as almost always, 100% correct. Tracie is one of the ACA members and does our Atheist Eve comic, which appears in the newsletter and online. If you're going to check that out, that one's from the January issue, which is going out in the mail. Right.
So, next on the line, keep the callers moving, it's Anthony.
Hello?
Hello.
How you doing?
I have this Christmas thing to tell you.
Yes?
Chestnuts bursting on an open fire, the frost nipping at your nose.
Okay.
Carol sing song by
okay, thank you for the song. That was lovely.
Sayonara.
Anyway, Christmas is over.
Yeah, the war on Christmas was lost.
Right.
They managed to have
we
a Christmas.
failed. Oh, well, there's always next year. Okay.
The evil atheist conspiracy.
Hey, how y'all doing, man?
Hi.
Hey, Brian.
Well, you know Christmas is a lie because it's a celebration of pagan gods, for number one. And you're not supposed to lie to your kids. If you know the commandments, you're never supposed to lie. So if you're lying to your kids about a Santa Claus, you know that that's not scripturally moral.
Yeah.
You know, and if you got your encyclopedia and you looked it up, you'll find out that Christmas is a celebration of pagan gods. Now, let me ask you something. Did any prophet or did the Messiah himself ever speak of pagan gods or celebrate in pagan celebrations?
Probably at some point.
I don't know that we can actually answer that.
Pagan gods?
I mean, disciples of real disciples and all the Messiah. Did they ever do anything? Did they deal with the pagans? No, they were righteous people. They didn't deal in pagan celebrations. They didn't deal with pagan gods.
Why is it particularly unrighteous to have a Christmas tree?
Because it said in Scripture, those who go and deck it and chop it down the tree and deck it with gold and silver are ways of the heathen.
Okay.
See, that's in Scripture. Now, let me tell you something. You and the other guy and all the atheist people, you almost fell under Revelation. Huh?
No, we're not almost to the point of believing in your God.
No, that's not what I'm saying. You let me finish. Okay, Revelations 12:9, the world is deceived. Now, I told you about that. I brought up the deception and the paganism for one thing. See, if you read your scripture, you only have
that one.
If you read your scriptures, you only have one person that's supposed to represent the Creator, and they are called the witnesses.
And how do you know that anything in this book is true anyway?
Well, the first thing about it, King James wrote that Bible, and it is really flawed.
Actually,
okay.
You have so many things flawed. You need a Bible dictionary. You need an interlinear. You need all kind of things. See, if you let me get to my point, you think I'm trying to attack you, but I'm not.
Assuming that you have every assurance that what you're reading is the right translation, why should you believe a single word in there? Why should you believe in a talking snake and a talking donkey and a guy walking on water and a giant seven-headed lion monster or whatever that thing was in Revelations?
Thank you so much. That's my point to you. You have all these preachers preaching these things that don't understand the Scripture. Any preacher who tell you a happy Easter, brother, a Merry Christmas, brother, that's pagan. They mix with pagan gods. The word God means pagan. He tell you in the book that they exchanged my name for Baal. Baal means God. That's all God worshippers. All of the preachers, Catholic, Baptist. But remember what I told you? You almost fell under Revelations 12:9. The world is deceived. See, you coming out of it because you've been seeking and you're finding out that stuff is lies. You're finding out that it's lies.
If it's lies, what's true? What do you think is true?
About what?
About anything. I don't know what your religious beliefs are.
We're not sure what you're trying to convince us of.
I mean,
I'm trying to say that I was brought up in the Christian church, and I was lost too. I fell under Revelations 12:9 under the deceived preachers.
So are you an atheist now?
What I'm trying to say when I say that I'm not like y'all anymore because I found out the truth. But I had to be like you until I found the truth. In other words, finding out about all the lies and not believing in God no more. About the man walking on water.
Okay, our time is limited on the show. Can you tell us what this truth is that you're talking about?
Well, is the Bible the truth in its original? When you go grab a Strong's dictionary and look through the Hebrew and Greek and Aramaic writings, is that what you're considering to be the truth?
Well, that's how you find the flaws in the Bible. When you go to...
I understand that. I know there's tons of them. I'm asking what you
scrap
believe.
the Bible. What's left? What do you believe?
I believe that there's only, just like Scripture said, there's only one man who's supposed to preach the scriptures. And anybody who ever preached in anything in the Bible, their name was mentioned of another prophet to come to preach. And he's how he said his house would be established in the last days. In other words, that's why you can't find the truth. That's why y'all non-believers, because everything that they're saying is lies and you finding out. But that's the only way to get to know him is when you stop believing those things and start to seek the truth.
I think you're a great demonstration of the scripture that says no man can understand the mind of God.
Yeah.
Because I have no clue what you're talking about. You haven't explained what it is that you believe and why. After pointing out that there are flaws in the Bible and that it's unreliable, your next sentence was, according to scriptures, this. According to what scriptures? If you've already said that they're unreliable, what reason do you have to believe anything that's in there? And just because you grabbed a Strong's dictionary to find out that this is a contradiction doesn't mean that what you find non-contradicting is any more reliable. So we have no idea who wrote them.
Sorry to cut you off, but we're a little pressed for time. We've got 20 minutes left in the show. The phone number should be down on the bottom.
If you want to explain the truth, you can email us.
Yes, please email us at tv@atheist-community.org. Tell us about the truth, and we'll take a look at it. Next caller is Phil.
Hey, Phil.
Phil apparently wants to talk about Pat Robertson, who said something stupid this week, right?
Well, he says something stupid every week. It's just that we only bother to report it.
Ariel Sharon died. Phil does not seem to be on the line anymore. Yeah, Ariel Sharon died, and Pat Robertson said something like, no, I'm sorry. Ariel Sharon didn't die. He's having a heart attack or something.
Had a stroke and is in...
Stroke. Yeah, and Pat Robertson says, God is striking him down because he was trying to divide Israel, and not because he's old and he eats too much.
Yeah.
That had nothing to do with it.
I would say, woe unto any prime minister who tries to divide God's land. God has said that this is my land.
Did you memorize that?
I memorize all the crap he spews.
That's scary.
Falwell and Robertson, man, I'm thinking about buying them DVDs and sending it to them, because I've called them a number of names, and I've called them on the carpet for things that they've said. And we were talking about one guy here's a lawyer who couldn't pass the bar exam, masquerading as a preacher, saying the most absurd things all the time. And even what I find particularly funny is even a lot of the fundamentalists and the extreme right wing, who would be considered his base, are now kind of sidestepping away from him, because
yeah, it's funny. Every time I hear a new Pat Robertson story, you got suddenly the right wing pundits saying, that guy's a lunatic and we don't know him. Pat who? What, influence with the president? No, we don't know what you're talking about.
When your friends start going to the other side of the room, you probably screwed up.
Yeah. Okay, well, sorry we didn't get Phil. Hopefully we'll have more luck with Larry. Larry? Is there anything wrong with the sound? Okay, Larry, are you there? Let me put Larry back on hold and give him another chance, and we'll try again with...
Oops, somebody took it off.
What?
It's all right, go ahead.
Okay, we'll try again with Jerrald.
Hello?
Hello?
Hi, my name is Jerrald. One of my relatives recently died, and right before he died, he was like,
no. Well, that was odd.
So he died,
that he did.
Like right during Christmas.
Yeah, but I don't know, maybe...
He's a casualty of the war on Christmas.
That's it. He started frothing at the mouth and singing Christmas Carol. Sorry. Let me try Larry again. Larry, are you there now? No, he's not. Sorry, Larry. Let's see. Okay, I got some more news stories.
Good, go for it.
I'm not going to sit here floundering on the air waiting for our callers to come through.
All day.
Yeah. Lines 3 and 1 are gone. Control room. Take note. And what happened this week? Oh, yeah, Oklahoma City. An executive committee member of the Southern Baptist Convention was arrested on a lewdness charge for propositioning a plainclothes policeman outside the hotel, police said. I
noticed that they didn't specify male or female, but they did use policeman. Yes. I'm under the impression from what goes on in the rest of that it was a man.
Yes.
Proposition.
Yes. Lonnie Latham, senior pastor at South Tulsa Baptist Church was booked into Oklahoma County Jail Tuesday night on a misdemeanor charge of offering to engage in an act of lewdness, Police Captain Jeffrey Becker said. Latham was released on $500 bail Wednesday afternoon. Latham, who has spoken out against homosexuality, asked the officer to join him in his hotel room for oral sex.
I think the officer's first name was Haywood.
Haywood Latham? That doesn't quite work.
No, Latham was the guy who was arrested. I was talking about the officer. Bad joke. Go ahead.
I'm sorry. Becker? Haywood Becker? No, I'm sorry. That doesn't work. Latham, who has spoken out, yes. Latham was arrested and his 2005 Mercedes automobile was impounded, Becker said. Calls to Latham at his church were not immediately returned on Wednesday. When he left jail, he said, "I was set up. I was in the area pastoring to police." Is that what you kids are calling it these days? Pastoring.
Yeah. You know, odds are, if you're really wanting to spread the good news and lead somebody to Jesus,
that's actually a pretty good way to do it.
Come on back to my place for some one-on-one sex action is probably not a good opening phrase.
I don't know. I mean, I think he was the wrong messenger, but, you know, send the right person out saying, hey, if you want to go know Jesus, let's go. Anyway, we've got callers now. Joe.
Hello.
Hi, Joe.
Hi, Joe.
Hi, I'm Joe Zamecki. If y'all may not remember my last name. Anyway,
Hi, Joe
your last
Zamecki.
caller was a
I'm
perfect
on a
example.
first-name basis with you, that's all.
Yeah, that's true. That's no problem. Your last caller cracked me up. Now, that was a perfect example of a devout supermarket Christian. You know, the kind who simply picks and chooses what they want to take
The one
and what
who
they
was
don't want to
singing
take.
things, or the last serious caller?
I understand. You're talking about the guy who was talking about grabbing a Strong's dictionary, etc.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah. I'm sorry. Another caller must have called.
Well, I have a software application which includes both or all of Strong's dictionaries and concordance, which I end up using. I don't necessarily know that I would consider him the average supermarket Christian, because I don't think the average one goes to that much trouble. No. I think this is a guy who, while he is picking and choosing in the way that I think you're getting at, I think he's gone to kind of greater lengths.
Yeah, he's the devout kind. That's what I meant.
Okay.
Well, anyway, yeah, that's quite common, and I really appreciate that most Christians don't take the whole Bible literally.
Yeah,
because if they did, my goodness, they'd be much more violent people. But I mean, there's whole chapters in the Bible that they must immediately discard if they are to be considered peaceful, humane people.
I've known people who do take the whole Bible seriously, and they are scary.
Sure. And we only hope that they don't act on what they're taking seriously so much, which clearly most people don't. I mean, if you pick up the Bible, you realize this is a completely different culture, a much more primitive one, and that the laws that God laid down for these people in this book simply cannot be played out literally in the extreme fashion to which they're written here and now in 2006 without people getting really in trouble.
You know, depending on how it's phrased, there's that verse that says, if a man lie with another man as he lie with a woman, you're supposed to stone them both. You know, obviously, if you take that literally, it might be in order to kill homosexuals. It could be, you know, two guys laying down cuddling up.
Right, and a whole lot of Christians are very angry at people like Fred Phelps at the Westboro Baptist Church, you know, GodHatesFags.com.
Right.
Really, all he's doing is taking a little bit more literally what the Christian God ordered in that Bible. Of course, he doesn't take it all the way as far as God said. Like you said, God said to stone them to death.
Well, he has a good ad hoc explanation for that, and that's that God also orders them to follow the laws of the land, which means he doesn't kill homosexuals because it's against the law. But as soon as it's no longer against the law, he'll be leading the charge with rocks in pocket.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Oh, and Fred is all about following the law. He's gotten very rich off the law because what he does is get people to take a swing at him, and then he sues them.
Yeah, sue me.
Yeah, that's working within the law.
Well,
do you have anything to say about the lecture that you'll be leading this weekend?
Sure. Just real briefly,
we showed pictures earlier.
January lecture for the atheist community of Austin at my place of employment, the Inner Space Cavern in Georgetown, Texas, 20 miles north of Austin. And it's a beautiful place. I especially enjoy telling people about how the cave has been under construction by nature for about 100 million years. And
you can't prove that. The Earth's only like 6,000 years old. What the hell are you thinking?
Right. Well, and then I also go and show them formations that are as old as 400,000 years old. And I tell people about this in a big, proud voice, in large groups as they come to visit the cave. And we even have religious groups come in for group tours, once in a while. And it's my great pride and joy to announce this to them and the young children's groups who come in, too, from daycare centers and churches. And it really gives me a thrill to say this out loud. And you know what? I've said it to thousands of people over the last half a year or so, and not one single person has ever raised their hand and said, hey, hang on now, the Earth is only 6,000 years old. Aren't you a little off in that 400,000-year estimate? No, that's never happened. And so that's one reason why I love the cave. As an atheist, I'm proud to show people this.
I think most of them would be too afraid to challenge it. I have, because I know or knew several people who were young Earth creationists, and if they were in a situation like that where they were hearing a lecture or anything that referenced dates beyond what they think is possible for the world, they just shrug it off as the ignorance of the secular world being poisoned by the great dragon devil Satan. And if they're with their kids, like if they're walking through with their kids and they don't actually bother to object to you, there are some who I can almost guarantee the second they get in the car will go on a let's teach the kids the truth story while they drive home and explain that the poor guy giving the tour got all the dates wrong and that we know from the Bible that the Earth is only 6,000 to 10,000 years old.
Right. Yep. It's that paper-thin evidence.
But at least you're doing the good thing.
Book. Well, I like the cave because the whole entire cave is loaded up with evidence that the Earth is millions of years old, and that evidence is rock solid. Literally. Also, that'll be next Sunday, 12:30 p.m., Georgetown, Texas, exit 259 on 35. Anyway, thanks a lot for letting me talk that up. And
sure thing, John.
Okay.
Have a great day.
Look forward to seeing you next week.
Yeah, we'll see you next Sunday for sure.
And keep up the skepticism.
Okay.
See you.
Bye.
All right.
Okay.
I doubt I'll be there next week. Oh no, I'm pretty sure I'll be there next week.
Okay, I think we've got the callers we lost before back, so let me give another shot to Phil. Phil, is that you?
Yes, it is me.
Hey, Phil.
Hi.
Yeah, I was the one that kind of brought up the Pat Robertson snafu. You know, the thing that infuriates me about that guy is that...
Did I get the story right?
You got it exactly right. The way he claimed that Ariel Sharon's stroke was because he tried to slice up Israel. But the thing that infuriates me about it is that if somebody similarly situated in Iraq or Afghanistan did the same thing, the first thing those guys on Fox News would be saying, well, how dare he? You know, there's no such thing as a holy war. You know, when these guys scream holy war, 100 million Arabs, Islamic folks in the Middle East scream holy war, they need to look no further than Pat Robertson to confirm their suspicions. And I just wanted to see, I'm sure you agree with me on that, but also this recent news about Ralph Reed, Pat Robertson's prior right-hand man, getting mixed up
who's in with Jack Abramoff.
Yeah, busted.
What a hypocritical bastards, and I'll let you go on that note.
Yeah.
Yep. Thanks for calling, Phil.
Yeah, I liked the Daily Show when they put up Jack Abramoff and dimmed Abram.
Looking as a gangster.
No, they put up his name, Jack Abramoff, and then dimmed Abram.
Oh. Okay.
You kind of have to
Jack off. Okay. I'm a little slow because I didn't see it.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because let's say that, you know, for whatever reason, you know, President Bush has a stroke tomorrow, and Islamic fundamentalists say that, you know, this is punishment directly from Allah. How's that any different from what Pat Robertson did?
Because Pat Robertson has the true religion.
Oh, Pat Robertson's religion's right.
Yes.
Well, Pat Robertson is a Pentecostal. Pentecostals, particular fun branch of Christianity, Protestants, whose entire religion is based on something which is probably a forgery. Or at least all of the important factors about that. In the book of Mark, chapter 16, which is the last chapter of that book, the oldest manuscripts for that book end at verse 8, but verse 9 shows up in some later manuscripts, and it goes from 9 to 20. And while we don't know for sure it's a forgery, the oldest manuscripts don't include it at all. But what's in this 9 through 20? And it's a direct order from Jesus for them to go unto all the world and preach the good news of creation. So this is the Great Commission, which Christians believe represents their duty to go out and proselytize to everybody. But what else does this thing say? It says, "In the signs that that will be demonstrated, so that you'll know that they're of me, Jesus, is that they will drive out demons, speak in tongues, pick up snakes with their hands, drink deadly poison, and it won't hurt them at all. They'll place their hands on sick people, and they'll get well." This one little clip of a handful of verses at the end of Mark is most likely a complete forgery and is at least not represented in the earliest manuscript, so it's unreliable. And in that one set, you have the Great Commission, you have the foundation of Pentecostalism, you have a really good excuse for all of these scamming faith healers like Peter Popoff and the others who have been exposed. And all that's there. And that goes back to just, not only do you not know who wrote it or when, but we've got good evidence that there's parts in there like that which are completely unreliable and probably a forgery.
But I love it that that's in the Bible, because it's such a great thing to bring up in arguments. Sure. Is like, if you're a real Christian, why don't you go chug that bottle of Drano that you have under the sink?
Yeah,
it says you won't be harmed.
It says you won't be harmed in any way.
What are you calling Jesus a liar?
Ineffective. All medicine should be ineffective on Christians.
No, it only says you can drink poison and have no effect.
There's not that much. Well, I think you can make the argument.
Well, maybe.
It's nifty stuff. And I think most people, and especially most Pentecostals, probably have no idea. Okay.
Well, short on time, just going to remind you before we go to probably the last caller, we've got 3.5 minutes left. You can meet us 45 minutes from the end of the show at Mongolian Barbecue, downtown 117 San Jacinto. And if you fail to get on today, then you can always email tv@atheist-community.org and start a discussion there, or you can wait till next week's every Sunday at 4:30. And you can be like the first person to call in. Okay, so Larry, are you there?
Hey, you there?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Hi.
Cool. I just wanted to relate something that I listened to on Terry Gross. This had been a couple years ago, but she was interviewing the head surgeon for what I believe was the UN, and basically his job was to travel from war zone to war zone. Dealing with the casualties, the wounded, the sick, the people being affected by the wars, and it was a very, very intense interview, and obviously he described the horrors of war, and at one point toward the end, Terry said, to live the life that you've lived, you must have extremely strong sense of faith, or she said it in a way something like that, in God or whatever,
right?
Which is uncharacteristic of Terry, but it just seemed appropriate at the time. And he paused and he said, "You don't do what I do and see the things that I see and deal with the things that I deal with and come away with a belief in a God."
Huh. Interesting.
Yeah,
I think that Americans are just so removed, and the majority of Americans at least are so removed from the world outside our borders that it's so easy to preach their preachings, and they're believing their God and whatnot, particularly Christian, but. I found that statement very powerful.
I will have to say, very insulated over here. I mean, I personally have never known anyone who died except of old age.
Right. I actually had a guy talking about the historicity of Jesus tell me that it was proof of Jesus was that slaves were treated better after Jesus came. That's how one of the ways Jesus changed the world. Slaves were treated better. And I'm like, I think there's slaves that came after Jesus who would object to that classification or to that characterization. And why are you keeping slaves anyway? Who says people are property?
Yeah. Right, you would think that Jesus would have mentioned the whole, oh, by the way, eventually you should cut that out. Anyway,
we gotta go.
Thanks for calling. That's our show, everybody, and now here it is, your moment of Zen. Oh, wait, sorry, wrong show. We don't have another screen. But thanks, everybody who participates in the making of the show. See you at Mongolian Barbecue. Thanks for watching. See ya.